with Elizabeth, I had found a best friend in her. And so losing them as a couple that we didn't have the greatest swinging relationship with I felt like I was losing a friend, and I didn't want to let that go.
Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We always strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy and positive approach to non-monogamy.
However, everyone approaches this a little different, and at its core, our show is about hearing and learning from the different experiences and approaches people have. With that in mind, it's important to remember that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of our own.
It's also important to remember that we aren't doctors or therapists and that we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on this show.
One final thing that we need to let you know about is that this podcast will hopefully include some explicit language. So, if that kind of thing offends you, we suggest you just keep listening until it no longer does. However, if you're under the age of 18, you should probably stop listening or gather up your parents and listen as a family. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 61! Woo woo!
Woo, woo, woo.
Today's a really special day. Right?
Yeah, it's an anniversary of sorts.
Yeah. First off, we're Finn and Emma, and today marks the 1 year anniversary for our podcast.
61 episodes in 1 year.
Yeah.
Not too shabby.
It's pretty awesome.
So, what are we doing today that's even more special? We've got our very first ever 2-time guests.
Yes. So, anyone who's listened to the show, if you listened to episode 2, you heard the story of Taylor and Ryan.
Our very first guests and the very first supporters of the show.
Yes.
So thank you to them.
They hate it when we thank them so much.
But thank you to them.
And guess what? Today's a repeat guest they get to share more of their story.
Yeah, their story has evolved quite a bit since the days of a year ago.
Yeah, a lot.
And so it's really fascinating to hear where they're at, and they share a lot of emotional and deep stuff with us. So it was an awesome conversation. They actually flew all the way down to Argentina with us back in February.
Not with us, to meet us.
To meet us.
Yes.
In February, and this was recorded then. So
live in near a vineyard.
In a vineyard. We were in the vineyard.
Yeah. The Airbnb was in the vineyard. It was amazing. And we're so grateful that they came down. It was a lot of fun.
So yeah, so that's awesome, and the interview is awesome. Before we dig into it, we did want to say a couple of thank yous to people that made us getting here much easier than it would have been.
Yes. Bear with us for just a minute. We really want to make sure to thank these people.
So in a particular order of sorts, the first one is a handful of friends that really, without them, we wouldn't be here because we kind of relied on them early on to help get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
So the first ones, Taylor and Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Taylor and Ryan.
The second one's
Phoenix and Beast.
So, yeah, that one was really fun because we reached out to them. We're like, hey, we were thinking about doing this podcast. And like, yeah, we'll do it. Let's do it right now. And we basically did it like a day later.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
So that was fun. Sadie and Todd.
Yes.
Episode 10, I think. Something like that.
Of course. Very good friends of ours. Wonderful people and always very supportive of everything.
It was episode 10.
Good job.
We've got Steph and Dave.
Also very good friends, very supportive as well.
Episode 23, so you're going to want to listen to that one. Very fun one. We were a little buzzed. Also an in-person interview. So was Sadie and Todd.
Yes. Yep.
Then we've got Abby and Justin, episode 30...
You're falling behind. Slacking off.
31. So, yeah. They've also been big supporters of the show. So thank you to all of the friends that we pulled on.
And I'm sure there are more too. And I'm sorry if we've missed anybody, but those are the ones that we know early on really supported us. And we just wanted to make sure to mention them. Next up,
we have a special shout out to Adam of Adam and Eve. Not the
spiritual swingers.
The spiritual swingers, not the actual Adam and Eve. We're not that
because
deep.
They were confused.
They might have been. So early on, very, very early on, we did like a test pilot episode that we recorded, our episode 1, and we sent it out to a handful of people. And Adam was really the only one, I think, that really responded back. I mean, some of the other ones were like, yeah, it sounds awesome, but he wrote like a 5-page report on the episode.
Maybe not that, but he wrote at least
4.5 pages.
5-paragraph email, maybe.
Yeah, so it was awesome that, people that he'd never met or didn't know anything about, he took the time and energy to do that. So thank you to them. And they also came on the show. That was episode... I don't know. Hold on. It's in here. 16.
Okay.
Now that people are asleep. So then we've got a couple other podcasters and content creators that either came on the show really early or had us on their show really early without even really knowing who we are. Basically,
like we didn't even have any episodes out, and we were reaching out to people to ask them, and people, podcasters and other people just came on the show.
Getting that early support from the community was huge. So in no particular order, but Swinging Down Under and Priory Society both came on the show and had us on their show right out of the gate. And that was really awesome to both of them to help get our name out there.
And by the by, came on our show, and actually we had to record it twice because of internet difficulties.
Yep. So actually I'm bummed about that because I had one of my best jokes ever on our first one, and it wasn't salvageable. So no one will ever know.
Nope. You'll have to just make more jokes.
Not likely. So then we have Monogamy Disrupted. They discontinued their show, but Nadia and Malik came on. They were episode 3, and right out of the gate, super awesome, super supportive.
We got a thing, put us in their newsletter pretty early on.
Yep. So that was awesome too. Maybe in the first month or 2, we were in their newsletter. So that was awesome to get their support.
And then there was a handful of podcasts that we actually were lucky enough to go on. And that was, I don't know, it was really actually kind of crazy to me to think that we were on these other people's podcasts.
But not as crazy as the fact that we have a podcast.
No, it's also a little crazy. But
so very early, I mean, again, some of these people, we were nobody. They didn't know anything about us. So one of them was Gay Talk 2.0. It's a podcast.
It's a super fun podcast.
Yeah, they're awesome people. We wrote to them, and they interviewed us and had us on. Our show launched the week after our interview with them aired. So we didn't even have a podcast when they interviewed us.
Yeah.
So that was super awesome. So thank you to them and for having us on to talk. And you can listen to the show even if you're not gay. I asked them that. They said it was fine. So they're awesome people.
Next up is Life on the Swing Set. They have been very instrumental in our journey throughout the last almost 10 years and 9 years. And
they had us on an episode in the middle of June. We recorded it in June. It came out a couple months.
I think in August or something, there was an episode. Yeah.
So that was really neat to be on there, part of their roundtable discussion.
Yeah, that was actually, that was like crazy. After listening to them for so many years and then be like on their show.
We're on the show, baby. Let's see. Two Married Sluts had us on. I think they're rebranding their show name. They're sort of in between seasons right now. I was looking at it the other day, but Bowie and Tristan, awesome ladies, doing awesome good work out there in the Northwest. What are you doing?
I looked up the Life on the Swing Set real quick. They are episode 332, and it came out on September 10th, 2018.
And Two Married Sluts, we were episode 3 on July 13th.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So if you're curious about hearing more about us, go check those episodes out.
The other ones, just recently we were on Front Porch Swingers, and at the end of December we were on Sex Out Loud with Tristan Taramino, and on Christmas Day we did our very special
Christmas Day release.
Christmas cheer-up-a-thon with the Bed Hoppers.
Yes. If you are... needed, something to cheer you up or love something to laugh at, go listen to Bed Hopper's Christmas Day episode because we share a bunch of bloopers on both sides.
Yeah. And spoiler alert, we're already scheduled to do it again for 2019.
Yeah.
So we will see you again on Christmas, Bed Hoppers. It's a date. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yes.
We don't want to keep talking at you before we get you into the Taylor and Ryan version 2.0. But again, just thank you to everybody who made us being here possible.
Yeah. Thank you for all your listeners. Like, thank you for reaching out and telling, like, if you just wanted to say hi to us or tell your story and come on the show, like, that has been how this show has succeeded.
Yeah, I think anybody, we've had a lot of listeners. A lot of our episodes are listeners who just reached out and said, hey, I want to tell my story. And I think we're honored that anybody would trust their story with us.
Yeah.
So thank you to them. Thank you if you wrote in, gave us feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you if you just said hello.
Anybody who left a review.
Yeah, anybody who left a review. That's awesome. Yeah.
And also anybody who used the links on our resources page. Thank you for signing up with Cassidy links or using our STD check links.
Yep. Both of those really support the show. And, it's awesome. Plus, you get tested. So, yay.
Or join Cassidy.
So, yeah, I think maybe with that, we should go hear what Taylor and Ryan have to say. And once again, thank you to them for coming on the show. So, yeah, let's go hear what they have to say, and we will see you on the other side.
Yeah, so now we'll be transported all to Argentina.
In February, which is the middle of summer, so it was about 105 degrees.
It was very hot.
And a little warm.
Okay, let's go. Take 4.
So live on tape from San Rafael, Argentina. We've got some repeat visitors. We flew them in just for this interview.
Yeah, kind of not true, but...
Taylor and Ryan, thank you for coming back on the show to share the 1-year update on the 1-year anniversary of our little podcast. And maybe more importantly, thank you for being the very first people to put your faith in us and come on the show and share your story so we could actually have a podcast.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you.
Of course, we're happy to be here.
And the 4 of us are currently sitting in Argentina in a vineyard in an Airbnb, and Finn and I have been traveling South America for a little while, and they decided to come visit for a few days, which was amazing. And we've been having a lot of fun wine tasting and hopefully rafting tomorrow and just hanging out. So thanks for making the trip.
It was a long trip.
Yeah, I know.
But the interviews must go on, and our Wi-Fi is not good, so you had to come in person. So what has happened in the 1 year since we last talked to you? And maybe real quick for anybody who hasn't listened to episode 2, a quick synopsis would be you've been together for roughly 15 years, and 10, 11 or so years into that, you started exploring swinging together and did that for a few years, and now the story and the dynamic has shifted a little.
Yeah, so when we podcasted with you guys last, we had cut our story a few months prior to what was actually happening. We weren't quite comfortable telling you because we were in the waves and throes of switching our non-monogamy from swinging to polyamory.
I don't think we even really knew what was happening at the time, to be perfectly honest.
Right, so we just couldn't talk about it then.
Yeah, that's fair. It was only like 2 months into it all. So.
Right. We had no clue what we were doing.
So what now that you've been able to, a year into it or so, look back, I guess, can you take us through, like, what was the catalyst for the change and how did that come about?
So if you have listened to episode 6 of Jake and Elizabeth, we had met them in the really early part of the year. And we had kind of taken them under our wing swinging. And things became... I had a really great relationship with them. And I got to a point that I wasn't ready to let go.
Well, the reason you were having to think about that was there wasn't, as often happens, and it's something that we struggled with too, is there's not always a great four-way connection. And it's not that it's something wrong with one person or two people. It's just, I have to like both the woman and the man, and Emma has to like the woman and the man, and they have to like both. It's just, there's so many connections that have to happen to make that work.
Right, and we struggled with that our entire swinging career, like most people did. Not that it was a career, not like we had stats or anything. I mean, we do have stats, but you don't need to know those numbers.
But finding that four-way connection is difficult.
Right, and I had, with Elizabeth, I had found a best friend in her, and so losing them as a couple that we didn't have the greatest swinging relationship with I felt like I was losing a friend, and I didn't want to let that go. So, we kind of turned to, maybe we should start doing this a little bit more separately. What does separate swinging feel like? What does separate play feel like? We had always struggled a bit with me being the pusher and Ryan being the puller, and, having to work through that as a couple. And we're kind of at the point where we wanted to give each other a little bit more happiness and a little bit more freedom, because we were feeling a little bit restrained.
Well, I think that's something that we saw too, right? In knowing you guys for a few years, is that Ryan likes to make a little bit, it takes a little longer for him to make that connection to where he wants to move to the sexual side of things. And you moved at slightly different speeds, and that seemed to be a point of contention.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just slight, and with this particular couple, it wasn't a slight difference that we could just move on. It was a pretty large difference. It was past the point that we had made the decision to try to separately play and to have separate relationships. So we kind of went with each other's blessing. I hate that word though. With each other's consent and a ton of conversation, and a lot of conversation, more conversation than I could possibly go through. Probably every conversation for a few months was centered around it.
Yeah, and I would like to say that it was a very slow process.
Right.
It started off with I wanted Taylor to be able to maintain her connection, so
because you wanted to see her happy.
Yeah, I wanted to see her happy, and so I encouraged her to continue this on a every other month kind of basis. She can go off and have fun with them, and sort of over the period of the year, that frequency increased, and sort of our boundaries and rules decreased, and it was a very slow evolution.
Right. So as I saw Jake and Elizabeth more, Brian decided to date on his own as well, and his frequency increased with how often he was meeting women, and
which was a challenge. Just letting me do that was a huge challenge.
Right. Even just asking each other for, can I go on a date tomorrow? This is going to take away time from this other thing that we normally have. Even asking the question was challenging, not the person just responding, but for the person asking.
Yeah, that's been something that we face to this day. It's hard in swinging. You're not asking to take something from your partner, you're asking to do something together. But in our life, we have childcare responsibilities and whatnot. For me to go on an extra date means that Taylor has to watch the kids by herself, and vice versa. So everything we do it's an ask, and it's not easy necessarily.
Right. And I feel like that's actually very, that makes our relationship is not just polyamory now, it's hierarchical polyamory. Our relationships now are hierarchical, and we maintain ours as a primary relationship.
Yeah, so I guess it was a very slow evolution throughout that last year. Where are you at right now?
So for myself, I have Ryan as my primary partner, and Jake and Elizabeth are my secondary partners. And so we have a triad.
But you're not just a triad. You also have separate relationships with Jake and with Elizabeth separately. Right.
So triads are very interesting. Obviously, we're not a closed triad because I have Ryan in my life. But, I go on dates separately with Jake and with Elizabeth, and they have their own marriage and hierarchical primary relationship as well, and children. So that makes it very interesting. So sometimes the three of us go out, or sometimes it's just the two of us.
Yeah. And Ryan?
I currently have a girlfriend in addition to Taylor, my wife. I have a girlfriend that I've been dating for a little over 6 months now, and things have been really great.
Yeah, and so I guess maybe is it possible to back up a little and talk about like the shift from, you were doing swinging together, right? When it's time to go, you're going to go to an event, you get ready together and you go together and you have fun together and you come home together. And the shift from that to one of you is going and one of you is not. And like how did that impact your relationship, and did it force you to like come together at other times in different ways to sort of balance out what was a together activity has now become a separate activity?
Right. So we do have a lot more dates with each other now. It was something that was actually extremely important to me personally. I forgot which non-monogamy book there is, but one of the big ones talks about a study of monkeys that they fed them both cucumbers, and they were both satisfied eating cucumbers, and they could see each other through the glass eating cucumbers. And then they started feeding one of them grapes, which was the dessert treat, and the other one starts freaking out.
He didn't want the cucumbers.
He didn't want the cucumbers anymore. He wants the dessert treat too. So seeing each other go get grapes with somebody else made us freak out about our cucumbers at home. So we were like, that's it. We need to go out and find that bunch of grapes together.
Even though Ryan has a nice cucumber.
It's a lovely cucumber.
Good one.
Stating the fact.
It's very crunchy.
Oh my god.
Probably want to get that looked at.
No biting the cucumber.
Oh, no.
So how is that for you, Ryan, like navigating the, I guess, differences in separate versus alone play, or separate versus together play?
For me, honestly, play is such a small part of it. Like, Taylor goes out on a date and I know she's having sex, and it's not really, that takes nothing out of me. That takes no emotional energy whatsoever. It's really about time management and like the hours of the day. And Elizabeth and Jake live a little ways away, so Taylor needs to leave to try to beat traffic at like 4:30, so I have to take off work a little bit early to make it work. It's about time management. Time management has been like 100%. Not 100%.
Google Calendar, I didn't realize how reliant poly people are on it. And we absolutely have become Google Calendar experts because of it. We didn't really put stuff on our calendar before. We just kind of, randomly a thing or two. But now my calendar is color coded, and I can switch on somebody's calendar and switch off, and it's complex.
Yeah. Because that's how you make it all work.
That's how we make it work. That's how we keep things. We try not to be tit for tat. I think it's really important not to you had 4 hours and so I get 4 hours, or you get that second date this week and I didn't get the second date, or
which is a natural feeling, right?
Yeah, it's something we have to fight constantly. Even if it's just in my head, I can't necessarily, we can't keep the score, because then you start feeling bad or feeling guilty.
Right.
So to me, it sounds like a lot more work and a lot more stress. And I'm curious, it seems obviously you stuck with it and didn't revert back. Does the dynamic work better than it worked when you were swinging?
I think that we probably should answer this separately, but for me, absolutely.
Well, to be clear, you're not swinging at all anymore. You have your primary relationship, and then you have your other relationships, and that's it.
There was a few months in there that we thought we would continue swinging, especially in the beginning. We even went to the club once. I think we went on one date. It was something that we hadn't given up completely. It's something that just kind of went wayside, and then we had the conversation kind of later in the year. I don't think we're going to do this anymore.
We never really identified as swingers. It was a good description of what we were doing, but it wasn't really part of our identity. But
Yeah, so for you,
for me, poly works for me a lot better for a few reasons. First, I always felt like in swinging dynamics, where it was Taylor and I and another couple, I always really enjoyed the time leading up to when everyone starts having sex. Like, I enjoyed the lead up. And it always felt like everyone else was on like this time schedule to like start having sex as quickly as possible. And that made me really uncomfortable. And it meant that I had not as good of a connection as I wanted. It also meant that I was getting less of what I found valuable and what I enjoyed about it.
because you liked the conversation and the flirting and like that point, parts leading up to it too.
Right. So swinging wasn't the perfect form of non-monogamy for those reasons. The other thing is that Taylor and I met very young, and we hadn't had much dating experience, and so to be able to experience dating, I mean, and internet dating wasn't a thing when we got together, and so like to be able to experience that was very fun and rewarding in certain ways. I mean, the other aspect of why this is better than swinging for me is my relationship. Like, my relationship is amazing, and I enjoy having sex with someone that I have a really deep connection with much more than I enjoy having sex with someone that I don't have a deep connection with. And I now have another person in my life that's really amazing, and that's super valuable.
Yeah.
I'm the most content I've ever been in my entire life.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's amazing.
So
and how about you, Taylor?
So for me, swinging worked pretty well, mainly because I was the person pushing toward the bedroom first, always pulling Ryan along. And but Polly's been really nice too. You know, I didn't really need the super deep connection for the sex part, but I've really enjoyed having a deep connection with other people. You know, Ryan and I, our orbits are the same. Like, we have the same friends. You know, we obviously have the same family. We have everybody in our life we're both connected to, you know, in similar ways or same level. So now we finally have these connections that are not in this, you know, obviously we know each other's partners. We know our metamors, but we don't, you know, our connections are not the same. His is obviously much deeper than my connection.
Right. With him.
You know, mine's just on a friendly level. His is a relationship level, and, you know, vice versa. So it's nice for me to have relationships that are important to me, that are not just Ryan.
Yeah, one of the big trends of this year and poly versus swinging is that poly has forced us to be individuals. And since we got married so young and we've been together for so long, we had started acting as a couple and have sort of lost our sense of identity.
Not that we're not unified in most situations, but, you know, even our hobbies became the same. You know, and for lots of people, especially monogamous folks, that's great. You know? But
it's like reestablishing ourselves as individuals has been nice as well.
Yeah, you find that sense of independence too, or not that you didn't have it before, but maybe not. It was not as prevalent.
You find the strength in yourself and not to be so dependent on somebody else for your strength.
Right.
So I'm curious then, and this is like a little more of a specific question, but when I would assume one of you or have either of you arrived at the first time you told another person that you loved them? And what was that like? Because I think that's something that would be, I mean, that's a scary thing to come to the realization, I imagine.
Yeah. So let me just say, like, so Taylor was the first for that to happen. But I think before Taylor said that, like, I had been pondering for a long time, like, what love, like, Polly had made me think about this a lot. Like, what does love mean? What does it mean to love someone? And I feel like in the monogamous world, people sometimes sort of simplify it to being like this binary attribute. You either love someone or you don't, and you can only love a single person. Mm-hmm. And I reject that. Like, that's just totally wrong, because if you go by that premise, then, you know, the first time I said I love Taylor, I must have been lying, because I love her more today than the first time I said that. And how do you reconcile those two things? The only way you can reconcile those two things is to say that love is diverse and has different forms and has different magnitudes.
Mm-hmm. So you have, I guess, to answer his question directly, you have reached that point.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we both reached that point. Different times. I mean, my triad relationship is complex, and I know I didn't want to be the pusher in this situation, you know, and it's so difficult for me not to push, but I'm like, this is the one thing that I cannot do. You know, I didn't want to push this L word upon anyone. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it took longer. Mm-hmm. And I have this moment that I was like in the laundry room and folding clothes, and obviously I was like thinking about this whole love situation. And Ryan comes by and he looks at me, he's like, you know, he asked me about like my date the night before, and he's like, you know, you're in love with them. And I looked at him like, no, I'm not. That's not happening. Like, this is not what's supposed to be happening. He's like, I know you are. You don't have to say it, but I know you are. And, you know, and that was the first time I tried to, like, I actually admitted it to myself, like, silently.
Yeah.
You know, and I sat there and, like, cried in the laundry room or something. You know, and because I've been with Ryan so long, he's actually really helped me with my dynamic with my relationship with them. You know, because he can read me so well, and he sees me every day. He doesn't just see me weekly for a date. You know, he sees me every day. He can see my emotions every day. He can tell if I'm moping around or if I'm like floating on air.
Yeah.
You know, he knows what I'm feeling. And for him to tell me like that's what's happening right now, it was kind of a big moment. I still had to wait a few months, I believe, but you know, eventually happened.
For me, one of the interesting things was when I realized that I was in love, I felt a huge guilt associated with it, and I had to process like the guilt of loving someone else, and that
because you felt like it was betraying your wife, like in a way. That's what we're
absolutely
taught, right?
Even though this was negotiated and she is on the same page, but yeah, there was guilt.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's something that we used to, in the beginning days of us dating separately, we just try to put rules on each other. You know, and if you read all the poly books, they're like, you know, rules are bad. But rules make you feel secure. So it's kind of like a back and forth, you know, like playing with yourself and playing with you're comfortable with. And you have to mind the gap of like what you want to be this perfect poly person, but you're also not always capable of it, you know. So sometimes you need to say no or put a rule or ask for something in return, and it's been interesting. You know, I want to make sure that the audience realizes that it was a year full of conversation and a year full of growth, but it was a year for the betterment of our lives. You know, this was a change that we made permanently. We had a point near to the end of the year that, you know, not that we had any kind of like veto rule, you know, like in poly people, they have a veto rule. Like you need to break up with your girlfriend now, you know, because I don't like her, or she did this to me or whatever. And then in turn, we would, you know, like both break up with partners.
Yeah.
But I had a moment that was like, not that we ever had that rule in place, but we had a point of no return. You know, we had a point that like, even if I broke up with my partners, I could never ask that.
Of him.
Right. Because I know that would break his heart.
Right.
And, you know, breaking his heart would hurt our relationship.
Yeah.
You know, because I know that his relationship with his girlfriend makes him happy and makes him a better person. And it doesn't take anything away from me.
Right.
You know, which was a really hard lesson to learn. Like, just because it's a little bit of time
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it actually it's not really taking anything from me.
Right.
I get a couple less cucumber slices, but whatever. But I get some grapes now that I never, I didn't get as much grapes before.
Right. Yeah.
He only has 2 grapes, by the way.
You're always one to come in and try to lighten the mood, right?
I'm just stating facts. So, again, back to my...
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So was it... I mean, it sounds like it was again, you talked about the guilt, like it was hard for you to come to that realization. Maybe not hard to come to it, but hard to vocalize it because you didn't want to hurt the other person. I guess on the receiving end, was it hard for you to hear, like, my partner's in love with somebody else and reconciling what that meant?
So to answer the first part of your question, I wouldn't say it was completely easy to realize that I'm in love. Like, that's not like something that I have experience with other than falling in love with Taylor, 14 years ago or whenever that was. The second part of your question, as far as like when I realized that story that Taylor said about me telling her that she's in love, no, I felt compersion. I felt it didn't. I had already reconciled the fact that love comes in various degrees, and so the fact that she was in love with them, I honestly didn't feel like it was any threat to our relationship. I knew that, like, the fact that she loved Elizabeth and Jake, honestly, it had no risk to me. Like, I knew that wasn't going to negatively impact our relationship. And I didn't just logically know that. I emotionally knew that. So it didn't pose any challenge at all for me. But that's my story.
And I admit to being the more sensitive one in this situation. Ryan, compersion comes easily for him. Mm-hmm. And he's always enjoyed seeing me happy, right? And I don't get compersion as easily. I have
a little more jealousy.
I have a little more jealousy. I have way more insecurity. Mm-hmm. And all of that comes out, like every tiny insecurity, that stuff that I didn't really matter when it was swinging or when we were monogamous. Seeing little things that would happen, like this love word was probably it was a scarier more than an insecurity, because mm-hmm. I'd seen the love before too. I just didn't tell them in the laundry room.
Yeah.
So seeing the insecurities came up fast was like, you start going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You start asking yourself, oh my God, he's in love with another woman. That means he's definitely going to leave me. Right. She's this and this and this, and I'm not this, this, and this. And I had to stop myself from spiraling, and that's constant battle. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten way better at it.
Well, that's something you said, like you told me that early on, you, like when you were home alone, that was a time where you would start to spiral and like do facials and stuff and or take a bath and then think like, oh no, am I just doing this because I'm trying to make myself look prettier for Ryan? And like just the crazy self-talk that you sometimes can't control.
Right. I especially had to learn to be alone. Mm-hmm. And I am a hyper social person. And if you happen to know me. And so if there is somebody to talk to, I am talking to them. Mm-hmm. But when Ryan was out on dates, I was all of a sudden alone, which I've gotten more and more comfortable with. I learned that I could just go to sleep and not really think about it. But in the early days, Jake and Elizabeth would actually like Skype call me mm-hmm. every single day he was out, mm-hmm. Just so I had somebody to talk to, because they knew I needed that support.
Yeah.
And, in a way, if that wasn't going to work out with Ryan going out, if I wasn't going to be able to handle that, they weren't going to see me as often.
Right.
That's just the truth of the matter.
I mean, one thing that I would say that, like, just to elaborate on what you said, one of the really awesome things about poly for us has been that we have more support in our lives. Mm-hmm. We have more loved ones. We have more people that we can lean on.
Right.
And that's been really great.
Yeah. I mean, we have a polycule. You know, I call it the cool cule. Nobody really likes that name.
You're about to get voted out.
I know. I'm going to get voted off the cool island. And then, you know, and like this year we've been super social. Like we've been camping and have dinners, and we spent like New Year's Eve together. Like we have a social life with our polycule, which is kind of fun. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and that's part of the swinging thing that I missed, but we also know each other on a very deep level. Mm-hmm. You know, so it's hanging out with more like open friends.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Ryan, like you said, like you have that more support than you might
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of a trade-off. Like with swinging, we were going out more and meeting new people, and meeting new people is really fun. Mm-hmm. Swinging, like just having those conversations and learning who these people are and socializing. And we don't get that anymore, but we get something else instead, and that's these deeper friendships that are a big part of our lives.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever get back to where you want to go and meet people in a swinging sense, or have you?
I would never say never personally. Like I'll answer that for myself. It does not sound appealing to me right now. That being said, like the future is a long time and I'm certainly open to it. It's just
5 years ago you never would have thought you're right.
Not at all.
This like the socialness of being around sexually open people is super appealing. You know, I even took my triad to a Halloween party, you know, because they'd only been to like one other party besides the one we met to. And I'm like, you know what?
Just to be clear, a Halloween swinger party.
A Halloween swinger party. You know, I'm like, I just wanted to see that environment again. Uh-huh. You know, and it wasn't quite the right environment, I don't think, but it was still fun to dress up.
Yeah. And meet people, be social.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have another question, which is good because that's our job. A lot of times people say, like, when they start swinging that, like, you say, well, what's the thing that has impacted your relationship, or how has it impacted your relationship? And it's always, oh, the sex is way better than we've ever had, or we're having more sex, we're having better sex. It's always about that piece of it.
And the communication.
And the communication, but yeah, so now that and I think you probably said something very similar a year ago when we said, well, you know, how did swinging impact your relationship? Well, we're having way more sex and we're communicating better. How did the poly transition, or being poly, how is that impacting your relationship?
Sex and communication wise?
Or just
in general.
In general.
Well, I'll hit on those 2 points. Sex wise, we have the same, if not more, sex total, but some of that's shared with other people. Some of that's not each other.
Yeah, we have our same sex drives. Just, you know, some of it's, instead of once a month sharing with somebody else, it's like once a week we get to share it with somebody else. Mm-hmm. You know, our drives are still the same.
As far as communication goes, I think that poly has more challenges on communication. I think it requires the same level of communication that swinging does. The thing that I have had difficulty with, and it goes back to sort of that kind of codependency relationship model. In swinging, the codependency, and I'm using the word codependency very loosely here, but in swinging, that's totally fine. And
because you're a unit, you aren't codependent on each other.
You're a single unit in the swinging world, and you get to communicate about what's happening to your unit. Mm-hmm. And it sort of makes it so that it's, once you get to that point in the swinging world where you're navigating the swinging world together, communication becomes really easy because you're in it together, and the only sort of variables that you need to communicate about are who you found attractive, or do you want to spend more time with these people, or that sort of thing. And the answers to that are usually very well received. If Taylor said to me, like, oh yeah, he was really hot, and I said, oh, she was really hot too, no problem. Or vice versa if it was the other way. Like, those types of things aren't challenging. In the poly dynamic, we've learned that, I'll go out on a date with my girlfriend and something will happen, and I'll come home and Taylor will be half asleep and maybe not in the best mood. And it might not be the best time to tell her absolutely everything. Like, so there's a lot of rolling things out and choosing when to tell your partner about something, and because you are acting as an individual and not as a unit.
You're not in the moment together as much.
Yeah.
You're not in your non-monogamous moments together. So sometimes I would, especially early on, I would have a rough night, and I'm like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear anything. It's not, we didn't have, I want to eventually hear it all, but I can't do it right now.
Yeah.
You know, and that never happened swinging.
Right. Because you were together in that unit.
And, you know, we've had to learn, like, what makes each other sensitive, you know, and it's mostly based on our insecurities. You know, like, I'm not going to say anything actually, but like, if there's something Ryan is insecure about, I probably have tested the waters on talking about it before, but you know, he has said to me, yeah, that doesn't make me really feel very good. And I don't really need to know that.
Yeah.
You know? And so I don't.
Well, you don't want to make him.
I will always tell him what he wants to know.
Yeah, we've just learned that in this dynamic, there are things that, unimportant things, to be clear, that are best maybe not shared. But I mean, just to be very clear, like, unimportant things. The important things we communicate everything openly and quickly.
Right. And not that if I asked and I'm enthusiastic, I want to know, he would tell me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anything.
Everything. So it's not like the communication is somehow cut off or we're not holding back or we're not being secretive. But we're just trying to, you know, we hold each other's hearts. We're trying to protect each other and hold each other's hearts gently.
Right.
You know, and sometimes our hearts are beating fast and we can handle it.
And it's sometimes it's challenging. It's so easy to burden your partner with everything that you know, to just like share everything. And in a swinging dynamic, usually that's fine. Usually there's nothing that like you're burdening them with. But in poly, sometimes, you know, sometimes I'd rather not know. And
you don't want to know about the cucumbers.
Right. It's going to be a theme throughout the whole thing. If anyone hasn't figured that out already. How has it changed at all in the way you're out in your life, like to other friends and family?
Yeah. There's one obvious example that comes to my mind, which is we decided to out ourselves to my best friend. And when we were swinging, we had considered telling him what's going on because we had some really cool stories, not even sexual stories, but cool stories that are hard to explain without the explanation of like, oh, there's some non-monogamy involved here. And so there was like a good motivation to share, but we were worried about it. And then
we didn't want to answer questions either.
Yeah.
And then
why'd you go across the country to wine taste? I don't know.
Why'd you fly to South America to wine taste?
Right. Like, we want to be able to answer that question.
Yeah. But then in poly, the need to share has grown, I feel like, because I want my girlfriend to be able to hang out with my best friend. Like, that's kind of obvious, but like, that necessitates.
Your girlfriend also lives in the same town we do. So one of my rules was like, you guys live in the same town. You need to go to a different town to go on your dates because you're going to run into somebody. Yeah. And then like one of our circle of friends is going to like call me, or family is going to call me saying Ryan's out cheating on you or what, you know, and
we've had close calls. I've been on dates. And spotted multiple times.
Right. So me driving far away, I don't really have this issue.
Yeah. But you haven't been called out yet?
No. I mean, it's been explainable and more distant connections. So hasn't been someone close, and it hasn't been something unexplainable, but it's been a little scary.
Yeah. So you come out to your best friend, and you that went well, right?
Yeah, that went really well. He thought that he thought we were going to tell him something really scary, like maybe we were moving or something like that. So he was like, "Oh, this isn't a big deal," and that's been great because, like, a week ago we had a dinner party and our entire polycule was there, and my best friend and his wife and other people too.
They wanted to know the people who were important to us, and that was great. They wanted to. They're like, if you have somebody important to you, we want to know who they are.
Yeah.
How has it affected, or has it changed at all in terms of like talking with your kids about it? Because I know that's something at least a lot of people in the swinging world don't typically tell their kids that they're going to orgies and whatnot.
Right.
I mean, some do. We're not judging.
I think it also depends on the age level.
We're gonna, we keep everything age appropriate. They obviously don't need to know about our sex life, but they do. Ryan and I go out on separate nights, so when Ryan is out, we market it to the kids as, it's mommy's night. Mommy's going to do something fun with you. You get like mommy attention all night. And the same with daddy's night. Mm-hmm. And our polycule children are getting to know each other, and
it's actually been good for our kids in that they get really excited about the dedicated attention, because it kind of like it sets a bar for like, oh, this is going to be like quality time. And
like with one of you focus on them for the evening.
Right. And we focus on them those evenings rather than dealing with our hectic normal lives.
Yeah. And one of the things we had to like really balance with our Google Calendar was, how many nights do we get to go out alone? How often are family nights? How often do we, we have special events that are built into there.
Or your date nights together.
And our date nights together. And we have to be very diligent to balance it all.
Yeah.
Because sometimes things can get wacky, and then we start feeling bad. We're like, oh man, we haven't spent enough time together. But our kids are also need more family time. And, we're constantly balancing.
The one thing we've noticed is that our calendar is so full that it's normally fine. Like having a busy schedule is normally fine. Like, 2 nights are family nights. We have mommy's night, daddy's night, et cetera, et cetera. Normally that goes great. What the problem with it is when there's a wrinkle in your plan, when somebody gets sick or something unexpected happens. There's so much less buffer in our schedule to like absorb the shock.
What gives? We were like, well, everything's important.
Yeah.
Like do I cancel my date with my girlfriend? Does Taylor cancel her date? Do we cancel our date? Like it's just, there's so many more interdependencies and so much less room for error.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I like color code everything, so I can like turn it on and off and see like, well, it was kind of concentrated here, so we can give here, and like, I spend too much time staring at that thing.
Which you probably never thought you would, right?
No.
And you mentioned that your polycule kids are getting to know each other. Has that been smooth for the most part?
They kind of vary in age a bit. Not a huge range, but...
I mean, just to be clear, it's not like they think that there's anything special about these kids. They're just other friends.
Right, no, but
they're just
they're
dinner party friends. That's all they are.
But they're being more social and meeting new friends, and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. They have a lot of friends in their lives, and they don't think of these friends as being particularly special or anything. They're just more friends.
Yeah.
Right.
So one thing that we often try to bring up and is the topic around your sexual health, sexual safety, and how you navigate that. Has it shifted since you moved from swinging to poly in terms of the way that you practice safer sex, or I guess practice sex? I mean, we're always practicing.
Have sex?
Yeah, the way you do it.
We've practiced and succeeded twice.
Yeah.
That's all we ever need to know, right? That was a communication thing. We had a lot of communication about whether or not to become fluid bonded.
That's the term often used in the poly community to mean dropping condoms for penetrative sex. Mm-hmm. Although there's some ambiguity. Some people think that like if you have oral sex without a condom, that makes you fluid bonded. And who am I to judge? That's a perfectly valid definition as well. But
But in your case...
And in our case, I mean, in the swinging dynamic, we always used condoms for penetration, and we never used condoms for anything else. We always wanted our partners to be tested and shared our test results. But yeah, poly's different. We started off with basically the same rules, doing it the same way, but it evolved. Yeah.
It was one of those very difficult things that I asked for, and that I was hard to ask for, and I knew it was going to be extremely hard for Ryan to answer. But you ask for what you want, and you get the answer you get.
Yeah.
And I asked for it, and Ryan had some requirements, and
basically testing, make sure that there's current test results.
And to be clear, you asked to be fluid bonded with your partners.
Yeah, and so basically, within our polycule, there aren't any barriers anymore, and everyone gets tested regularly. And as of right now, it's a closed system. There aren't nobody's hooking up with randoms at bars, so we feel pretty safe in the dynamic.
And our testing schedule is actually, it's for us, it's higher than it used to be.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you would think if it's a closed system, I mean, what is the reason for continuing the testing? Just to support the show using the link. Because we appreciate it. But.
Well, here's the thing, though. There's links of trust. I can trust my partner that they've been tested, and maybe that my partner's been tested. But do I... each link, the trust diminishes a little bit.
Right.
So what about your partner's partner? If you had a big polycule, as it approaches infinity, the trust goes to zero eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
And so...
Fortunately, Ryan and I are near the center of our polycule. Not toward the end, but the two ends need to,
So, I mean...
trust. They know each other, though.
To be perfectly honest, it's mostly paranoia at this point.
Sure.
There isn't really a logical reason for it. And... if the situation was going to stay exactly the way it is forever, we probably would say, let's just stop. But the situation's always evolving. Partners of partners might decide to go on a date, or you never know.
Well, and you've had that happen. Some of your partners have decided to date, right? So at different times. So
yeah, it's not completely stable throughout time, and it makes things easier for everyone to have somewhat up-to-date test results.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I was just curious, because I think some people looking in would be like, well, if you have a closed system, that's no different than me and Emma being monogamous. I mean,
yeah.
Why continue to go through the trouble? But I think it goes back to, it's a trust thing, and it's who knows what's happening outside of your control. You can't control other people, and all you can do is ask to keep the transparency there.
Well, ultimately, if it makes you feel better and sleep at night, why?
I mean, I would say that the barrier for getting tested is so low. It's not that expensive. It's not that big of a deal. It's
and you can
why
support
not?
the show.
We encourage it. I'm not discouraging people from doing it. I was just curious, because I think it's important for people to hear how people in these dynamics approach it.
Talking to other poly people, it varies tremendously, because everyone's risk tolerance is different. Everyone's dynamic is different. Some poly people have far more partners than we do. And
it's closed systems.
So our polycule of approximately 6 right now, that's tiny compared to lots of polycules where if you charted it out and all of its links, there are polycules in California that are mind-boggling large. Not that everyone in that polycule would consider that to be one polycule, but
right.
But that there are links that connect them. Yeah.
So maybe getting close to wrapping up, I'm curious. Do you feel either of you have the capacity to take on additional partners?
No. For me, my triad keeps me very busy.
And fulfilled.
And, we have kids. And
I was going to say, your triad plus your husband plus your kids.
Yeah, right. It's plenty of people in my life.
To me, the only reason I would want to date someone else would be if I had excess time. And as it is right now, like, I would like to spend more time with my girlfriend than my schedule can afford me. So, like, the idea of that just sounds completely preposterous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question.
You know, we're like super happy and content with our lives right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice to feel like we're in a place that the transition's over.
Yeah. Well, and that's very obvious to Finn and I too, because we're friends and we've talked to you throughout the year, and we could tell, and we've had some deep conversations with you too. Like, we could tell there was a lot of things changing and moving, and a lot of communication and emotions, and seeing you now in person and spending a few days with you, you can tell that you two are much more content and happy and just enjoying where you're at now than the last year.
Than our frantic phone calls over Skype thing. Yeah. I mean, we were happy. Don't get me wrong. We were happy and content.
Maybe not.
Not content. We were happy swinging, but we tried something new, and it worked out for the better for us. You know, this is not any kind of like advertisement that swingers should become poly people. Like, absolutely not. But for us, it's just what's better.
One of the things I will say, that speaking as sort of a new poly person that was a swinger, more or less, if we're going to use labels, it's frustrating to see the swinging community sort of demonize or otherize the poly community and vice versa. Like, it happens both directions, and it's ridiculous. Like, there's so much overlap, and like, yeah.
Well, and the percentage of non-monogamous people out there is relatively low or small, and we're
ethically non-monogamous.
Yes, thank you. Ethically non-monogamous people, and that's why we're doing the show. Why not support each other, all of us? Like, why does it have to be one against the other and have all these labels? And sure, there are different ways to practice non-monogamy, but find what works for you, or maybe it works for you for a short time and then you change or whatever. But why not support each other?
So I do have something kind of to say about this subject, is that I feel like everyone who's a polite person is able to say, oh, that's just not for me, you know, but then like kind of in their own head can go back and go like, oh, they're crazy, or oh, they're that, you know, can say negative things to themselves. You reinforce the negative thoughts within themselves, but just be polite about it in public. You know, I think we actually need to change our internal mind frame of it.
Yes.
On, you know, not having negative thoughts about people who are doing things differently than you.
Yeah, that's very well said.
You know, because I can see a swinger, you know, I mean, I was a swinger. I was a hardcore swinger for a couple of years. I know the mentality. You know, I know what it meant to feel like when I met a poly person. Right. You know, what did I tell them to their face? And what did I think to myself later? Right. You know? And I had to change my mind frame of how I even thought about it myself.
Yeah.
Well, maybe in a, not in an accusatory way, but we know you struggled with identifying as poly.
Yeah. So part of one of my big things that Ryan and I, you know, had a ton of conversations about was I was doing the poly thing. We were dating separately. I would not use the word for months. I was like, I am not poly. I'm not putting a label on myself. This is not happening. Like this, I wouldn't use the word because I hadn't changed my mind about it internally. Mm-hmm. I couldn't say it out loud. And
it took time.
It took a lot of time. I even put it off on Elizabeth and Jake, and I'm like, you know, this is not what we're doing. We don't have to label this, blah, blah, blah. You know, and they were following my lead on it. So I had to it took a lot of convincing by Ryan, and a lot of you're making me feel like I'm doing poly and you're not, by not using this word. And I think that was starting to hurt him.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And you're being something different than I am. And, you know, but we are doing this poly thing together, quote unquote.
Yeah. You
need to use the language. Words matter.
Yeah.
You know?
So. I think one of the examples I've seen in the poly community, I haven't been to many poly parties, but I know people that go to poly parties, and they have house parties where a whole bunch of poly people go and they have sex with each other. and people that they might have just met at the party. Yet they will not use the word swinger. They are not swingers.
But
that's like the definition of swinging. Like, and so it's the distinctions, like, we need to be a little bit more just
accepting of each other.
Yeah, and not so quick to label.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't want to label myself.
Yeah, that's why you were struggling with it, right?
Right. But I mean, at a point that I had to change my,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think we covered some pretty good ground tonight, and that includes the 3-hour prep conversation.
Yeah, thank you for working through what we were going to say on this podcast with us beforehand, because Ryan and I have lived this whole thing for a year, and it's not like we have an elevator speech about this. We don't have to talk to other couples about our story anymore.
That's a really good point. Like, in the swinging world, like, you get used to telling people about what's been, like,
every single date, every first date, you tell them your story.
Yeah.
We haven't told anybody our story. So that's why we're thankful.
Until now.
Yeah, we're thankful for your podcast, because we're able to tell our whole story, and not the whole thing, because that would take days and days. But, we were able to, like, actually process it together while you guys watched us process before we started playing the play button.
Well, actually, we recorded it, and for $500 a month on our Patreon page, you can listen to that. It's 3.5 hours long.
Yeah. We didn't actually record it unless you were recording secretly.
You really make jokes really hard.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you do.
Anyway.
So, yeah, well, I mean, thank you both again for coming on the show our very first day, and 364 days later coming on again. So we really appreciate it.
In person this time.
Yay, in person. No Wi-Fi connection issues.
I know. Woohoo!
And I don't know where you'll be in a year, but we'll do it again on, I guess it'll have to be April 30th.
Oh, yeah. Good call.
So, we'll see you guys then.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
And thanks for coming down to Argentina, too, I have to say that. It's been so fun to have them here.
It's been awesome to have an excuse to come to Argentina.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go to sleep.
No, let's go to dinner. It's Argentinian time.
Argentinian
True.
So thank you to Taylor and Ryan for
They're gonna hate you.
Yeah, that's all right. For coming on the show, and
for being just really open and honest. They have obviously been through a lot in the last year and really challenged their relationship to new levels, I think, and the communication and
grew as people.
Yeah, and grew as people. And it was really wonderful to share the time recording that with them. And the whole weekend, we talked a lot about everything before we recorded, too. And
we drank a lot of wine.
And yeah, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we need to stop thanking them. Next week.
I got an itch. Okay, I'm done itching.
I think we've officially wrapped up the 1-year anniversary episode.
The thank yous.
We'll end the whole episode.
Yeah, so next week we've got...
Back to your regularly scheduled programming.
Well, this was regularly scheduled.
I know, but this was a special one.
So we have a couple, Brock and Jamie. Actually, his full name is Brock Hard. I learned that when we added him on Kick. I thought that's actually my favorite name. So anyway, we've got Brock Hard and Jamie.
Super awesome people.
Yeah, so they reached out. They were just listeners, found them on the Instagram. They're awesome. So thank you to them. And maybe next week we will tell you about a few more changes we've got coming this year that are awesome and super duper cool. Don't look at me like that. We've been talking about this for weeks and months.
Know. Okay.
All right. We'll see everybody in a week.
One quick thing just before we go. Go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. Send us an email, reach out, or use one of the links if you want to on the resources page.
And you can send a thank you note to Taylor and Ryan if you want, and we'll forward it along. All right. Bye, guys.
Okay, bye, everyone.